Hello and welcome to Nawiri Wellness Talks. Today we'll be talking about the adolescents and their development. Of particular interest will be the items that tend to make them clash with the parents. So we'll be trying to clarify some of those points to try and help make the relationship between the parent and the adolescent a little more smooth. So one of the things that I would like to say is, as adolescents develop, there is a lot of changes that they go through, a lot. And some of those changes make them quite uncomfortable, as it were. And yet they're changes that must happen. They are nature's way of helping them to transition from being children to adults. Now, one of the things that is usually most obvious is the physical changes that they undergo. So you'd find that the girls who develop, their breasts develop, the hips widen and they acquire height. The boys, they get more muscular, they develop a deep voice and all those things. So what is different between the girls' development and the boys' development? The girls tend to achieve the physical development earlier than the boys, and when the boys come in at about 13, they tend to sort of catch up and sometimes even surpass them, especially in terms of muscle build and height. Yeah. Now, the thing about physical development is the fact that the adolescents develop at different rates. There are those who develop earlier than the others. Those who develop earlier than the others tend to have different experiences depending on the gender. So for the girls who develop earlier, they tend to be subject to a lot of stress, and a good number of them could end up the way of depression. And some of the explanations that have been given is that when they develop, it is expected of them, because physically they look mature, they're expected to act maturely, and yet cognitively they are not yet ready. So that then puts them in a spin. The other thing would be that the older boys and even the more mature men would tend to sort of go after them for sexual favors, this and that. Now, that could potentially be problematic. Some of them comply and they then put themselves at risk, but others then, in the process of trying to fight that off, tend to find themselves constrained. For the boys, the ones who develop earlier, they tend to have advantages because they are seen to be, possible leaders. They are given leadership roles. The other guys look up to them, and it's all nice and rosy. So the thing for parents to note is, as they develop, you really want to be measured in the comments that you make. If you're going to make a comment about the pimples that have burst out on their faces, you possibly want to make that statement when it's just you and you're an adolescent, not in a public space. If you want to talk about any physical development that has happened to them, some of the girls are quite conscious as they develop their busts. You really don't want to make those statements in public. Just do it, where they're comfortable. And if you ask them, they'll tell you what they're comfortable with you saying and not saying in public spaces. So just be aware. Now, the other thing that happens with adolescents is, as they're transitioning from children to adults, there's a lot of risk-taking that they tend to interact with. And this is normal. It is normal because it helps them to gain their identity, gain their authority, and transition, as it were. However, this presents often in ways that are not very comfortable for the parents. So what does this mean? The adolescent tends to think that they are special and nobody is like them. And if they have any negative encounter, it is so catastrophic that if you try to explain to them, don't worry, it's not anything major, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about, mom, dad, just leave me alone. You have no idea. That is their feeling, and it is normal. As a parent, you really want to review how you're going to discuss the matter. The other thing that comes with that angle, and that particular element is called the personal foible, is that they feel that even though there are risks and they are aware, they feel that those risks will not affect them in the way that it would affect others. So they would tend to take those risks. So you would find that in an environment that is not properly supervised, they would do things that any other person wouldn't do. For example, they'd go and engage in sexual activity, presuming that they will not get any infection. That happens to other people. If they are girls, they are not likely to get pregnant. That happens to other people, and yet that is a problem. Yeah, they would experiment with alcohol and even drive, and they would say, I'm in control, so it doesn't really matter. So what then the parent ought to do to help them under those circumstances is to have conversations with them that makes I statements. So if you're unhappy about something, say, I feel this way about this thing that you have done, rather than go all out and try and bring them down, asking them, hey, what are you thinking? Why are you thinking? Are you crazy? Those sort of conversations don't really progress well. Yeah. It also helps if you could get a peer that they can relate to discuss some of those things with them. Because at this age, they really, really identify with their peers. So you being the advisor, you may not go too far in some instances, but keep the communication going. Do find peers that they can relate to. Yeah. Now, an item that I'd like to bring out is on the emotional expression of the adolescents. As the brain develops, the frontal part of the brain develops, there is a part that processes emotions. And the way it develops is that it moves from big to small until when it is fully mature, it attains a certain size. So at adolescence, it's at its biggest in terms of size. And because of that, all emotions that adolescents experience are very intense. They're the most intense that they'll ever experience in their lives. So if it's happiness, they experience it so many times more than the more mature people do. If it's anger, they experience it similarly, very many times more than the other mature people do. So what this then means is, as a parent, you want to appreciate that when they are angry and they demonstrate so much anger, it is within the space of normal. You just need to help them to be able to manage their anger effectively. If they are happy and they are seeming over the top, it is also still in the space of normal. There are things that you would really want to try and avoid them interacting with at this point in time, because when they experience them, they desire to have it more and more, and it creates a problem. One of those things is substance use and abuse. When they consume any of those substances and they experience the pleasure that derives from the use of those substances, it is magnified, and they will then tend to want more and more. And remember, we said that part of the brain is becoming smaller and smaller. So whatever quantity they use in the first instance, they'll probably need to use more and more to achieve the same level of feeling. So you really want to avoid those. Gambling, the same thing. Engaging in sexual activities, the same thing. So you want to get them involved in activities that are more productive. Get them to do things that are of positive social nature. Play a sport involving an art, join a social group, the church, the mosque, and those sort of things. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the issue of sleep. As adolescents develop, the hormonal changes tend to fluctuate, and with those fluctuations, the sleep cycle tends to be interrupted. So you will find instances where they are not really sleepy when you expect them to sleep in the night, and then in the day when you expect them to be awake is when they want to catch up with sleep. Yeah. Now, that is a function of the development that they're going through, and you want to support them by providing some form of structure within the framework of the home. Define ensure that meals are served by a certain time, activities that relate to school are cut off by a certain time, bedtime, electronics all out by a certain time, and waking up is at a regular time on a daily basis. If they feel like sleeping in the weekend and they have done the things that they needed to do, or you have an agreement which they have been respecting, it's okay to allow them to sleep in, because this is nature making them to, go sleepy, as it were. In other regions, they have even delayed the time for school commencement to allow for the children to sleep a little longer and therefore go to school a little later, and be able to be more productive. So those are the 4 developmental items that I want to talk about for the parents' attention. And if those are attended to, it is likely that the conflict that arises from them will be reduced and the relationship between the parent and the adolescent will be enhanced. So thank you very much. We look forward to your views and feedback on this particular topic.